Hello and welcome to the second U3A Radio Podcast, bringing you news of the organisation nationwide. With the country now in its second lockdown and with people not being able to meet, we're hoping that this podcast will become even more relevant as a way of bringing communities together. I'm Nick Bailey, and during the next 30 minutes, I'll be talking to the winner of the recent U3A Creative Writing Competition about her story of the clock. It's a humorous tale that will no doubt resonate with most of us, particularly if you've ever had to clear a house. We'll also be speaking to someone who calls herself the real Joan Collins about the book she's authored called From Liverpool with Love. It was written for her husband after he lost his memory of their life together.
I'm really privileged to be able to speak out about my love story and why I decided to write a book for my husband, Eddie.
It's a heartwarming tale of love and laughter over 50 years of married life. Following our first broadcast, there was a call through the U3A website for radio-themed photographs, and the judges were very impressed with the response and the imagination used, and a selection of these will show on your screen as you're listening. If, like me, you missed the sound of Leather on Willow this summer, there's a walking cricket group you can join once restrictions are lifted. Or perhaps nature appreciation is more your thing. Or maybe it's opera. But what happens when the leading man can't find his dagger? All will soon be revealed. Even with the entire country in lockdown, the U3A's chief executive, Sam Morga, says the U3A is more than up to the challenge.
So the U3A, as we all know, is all about meeting face-to-face. And when the pandemic started, it cut through our tried and tested model of the way we work. But the U3A members were undaunted. Many of us had never heard of technology like Zoom, let alone think about using it. The U3As, however, took to Zoom like ducks to water. And all over the country, people met to get their French lessons or ballroom dancing sessions or robot making sessions. You name it, they did it, and they did it on Zoom. Many of our members also joined the national programmes and joined our members from across the United Kingdom in things like photography, creative writing and maths, to name a few of those programmes. And the Diary Project, which was kept by hundreds of members during lockdown, formed part of the country's heritage and is being stored in the Mass Observation Archive project. Many U3As also supported members not online because we all realise that not everybody has access to the internet or is confident with it. However, as soon as we were able to creep out of lockdown, our members were at the start ready to get going again and begin meeting face to face. If there are future restrictions ahead, the U3A will rise to the occasion and we'll manage those challenges and keep our U3A community alive.
One of the great things about the U3A is the number of groups you can join. Colin Davison, a former newspaper editor and opera critic, is from the North Cotswold U3A, where he set up, several years ago, an opera appreciation group. This has continued throughout lockdown on Zoom, and Ella Watts asked him what kind of opera his members enjoyed.
I would say that the majority of our members like the standard 19th century repertoire, and we try to reflect that, although once a year we'll probably show something that is much more challenging from the contemporary world or the 20th century. Also one earlier work from maybe the 18th century or earlier. The overall mix is partly suggested by members, but then it's a matter of my looking around. I think the visual aspect of opera has become far more important. You know, the way the singers look and act, thankfully, much more dramatically convincing. And often I'm looking for a really good production that will appeal visually and dramatically, as well as simply being very well sung.
What's your favourite opera?
I will say Don Carlos by Verdi, and that's partly because it's my wife's favourite opera. And one of the good things about the lockdown has been the availability of operas from all over the world, many of them free online, and some of which you have to pay a modest fee for to hear. It's been a chance to hear some real rarities And some of those, I think, will get fed back into our local opera group.
What is special about opera?
You realise it's a form of heightened reality. You know, when people are very passionate about something, they want to shout out. And so singing is a sort of a form of expression of that. And when it's done really well, it's lovely to listen to, but it's dramatically satisfying as well. And it takes you to a higher level than just watching a stage drama. You know, when you see a good production, there are moments in the production which need to be heightened, and you introduce music in the same way as you hear background music at key moments in a film. Think of those thrillers. What would they be like without the musical accompaniment? They wouldn't work so well. And I think that's an analogy I would make with opera.
Have you seen some productions that were less good?
I remember seeing a production of Don Carlo. It was in Bulgaria. And in the story of Don Carlo, his greatest friend, Rodrigo, is assassinated. Rodrigo is the prime minister, and Rodrigo is assassinated by rebels, and he's shot while he's singing this great friendship duet with his friend Don Carlo. He's shot and then he collapses and dies. Except that in this particular production, the assassin had to come down a particularly rickety ladder at the back, holding his pistol in the air. And he slipped and fired the pistol about 10 bars too early. So Rodrigo goes on singing happily, and then 10 bars later, suddenly collapses, shot, as if the bullet has reached him by second-class post.
I'm sure I've heard you mention the Othello incident.
Well, things do go wrong sometimes. When you look backstage, you see all the props laid out for the actors to pick up on their way in. And there are little tricks of the stage that people have for fast costume changes and so on. You can imagine very often actors have got to go off stage and come on again very quickly. They don't use Velcro. If you heard the sound of Velcro going just off stage, people would know what's going on. They use poppers. And in this particular scene, Othello had come back onto stage after a quick costume change. It's the scene where he stabs Desdemona. And having come on and just done a quick costume change, the dagger belt wasn't quite in the right position, and you could see as the scene was progressing, he was a little bit worried about this. When the fatal moment came and he had to extract his dagger, the thing was stuck, he couldn't get it out. And so he sort of turned his back to the audience, and I was at the side, and so what I could see is on that night Desdemona died not of a fatal dagger wound, but of a fatal index finger wound as he stabbed her with his finger like this and tried to hide it with his other hand.
Colin Davison, remembering some rather unfortunate operatic disasters. We now move from the Cotswolds to Midlothian, where Hugh Monroe is a member of the Pennycook and District U3A. Pennycook derived its name from Pen y Cog, which in ancient British means the hill of the cuckoo, a rather appropriate place then for a nature appreciation group. Peter Cliff asked Hugh how it started.
My wife and I were in a local rambling group, but we found eventually that the distance covered and the climbing involved got too much for us. Went down a notch and joined our local U3A walking group. But after some time we found that even their walks were either too fast or involved too much climbing. And also we felt that not enough time was allowed for observing nature that was under us. We didn't have the time to appreciate it, and we didn't have much opportunity of learning from it. So we wondered how we could combine our physical ability restrictions with our interest in nature, which would allow time to observe the nature around us, so we could stop and observe, so we could photograph the wildflowers, trees, birds, wild animals, insects and fungi. Walk distance was shorter, maybe only 5 kilometres, and the duration would be 1.5 to 2 hours. No special equipment would be needed, but sturdy boots, binoculars, cameras, and some nature books would be useful. Then at our February speaker meeting, just before lockdown, our chairman asked the 50 members present if any were interested in joining a group. and 11 immediately signed up.
So you started just before lockdown. Could I ask, how did lockdown affect the group?
Lockdown genuinely was not a problem for us. In fact, it was a wonderful diversion in which we could immerse ourselves with none of the usual distractions. If you remember, the weather at the time was warm and dry. We were allowed outside for some daily exercise. We were lucky in that our group lives in a semi-rural area. We're surrounded by mixed woodlands, rivers and moors, all within easy walking distance. Returning briefly to the books, we found that rather than carrying a rucksack full of heavy tomes, we found that many smartphone apps did a very good job of identifying the things that we wanted to identify at either little cost or no cost at all. Looking at our 11 members, 2 still are not on email, which is a real limitation, unfortunately. 2 were shielding, but the others were active to varying degrees. So after a walk, what we did was we circulated brief reports by email. We told them where we'd been, what we'd seen, and we usually attached several photographs. Since lockdown, we've generated about 250 reports now, sent by email about 480 photographs, with a further 10 video clips from a wildlife camera trap that we set out in the wilderness. The husband and wife in shielding, although they were shielding, they were able to enjoy our experiences without leaving their home because of the emails. And for the 2 people who didn't have emails, what we did was I produced a compilation of all the reports we'd done up to that time on paper and posted it to them. So lockdown was not a problem, and even with the restrictions now imposed on us, genuinely it's not a problem.
Nature appreciation, that sounds fantastic, but surely you have to live in the countryside to enjoy it.
It's a big advantage, but in fact, not necessarily, because we have taken quite a lot of photographs in our own garden. You've got to have a garden. Or if not a garden, maybe you can access a local park. We've had a lot of fun photographing birds, a lot of butterflies, red admirals, tortoiseshells and so on. Nothing particularly rare. It is a bit of a limitation, but it's quite incredible what you can do. And you don't need expensive cameras. The vast majority of our photographs were taken with a normal smartphone.
Is it just a question then of looking around you, keeping your eyes open?
Absolutely. I mean, if you go on a normal walk, you will miss so much. If you just it's more of a stroll. It's a leisurely stroll. And always you're looking to the left, to the right, up to the left, up to the right, listening with your ears. It's observation and enjoyment of nature in its pure, raw sense.
So you've really got no excuse. Hugh Monroe enforcing the fact that sometimes we take nature for granted. You may remember in our first episode, we spoke to Mac McKechnie from Barnsley U3A about his creative writing group called Writers of the Third Page. He's a busy man because he also runs a magic group and a couple of years ago set up Walking Cricket. Ella Watts asked if Walking Cricket was exactly what it says on the tin.
Well, you said it really. It's not that simple, but yes, that's in a nutshell really. In 2018, I became seriously ill and was in hospital for E. coli and sepsis and nearly died. I spent several weeks in hospital. And when I came out, the specialist said to me, I really do need to get a bit fitter. I get short of breath, so I don't really enjoy walking a lot. So I gritted my teeth and I thought to myself, I'm going to try the U3A mixed walking football, because clearly it's a walking sport. It won't be a contact sport. Oh, no. If anybody says that walking football is not a contact sport, do not believe a word they tell you. There's people trying to hack your ankles and all the rest of it. And however, there was one day when I picked myself up for the third time from the AstroTurf, I suddenly thought, I wish this was cricket. Because cricket is my first love and always has been. I used to play in local leagues years ago for cricket, and I used to play in the army, and I thought, walking cricket, could there be? And I did a research on the internet, and there was very, very little around. Somebody made an attempt in Surrey, but that was about it. So I set to and devised the game from scratch. Having done that, I put an interest list up at a monthly meeting. I got a few names there, and I kept my fingers crossed behind my back, approached the chair of our U3A in Barnsley, who was a lovely bloke, and said, can I have a grant, please, for some kit? He said, how many do you need in a team? I said, well, 8 in a team. He said, that's 16, isn't it? I said, yeah. He said, how many have you got? I said, 12. He said, no, you can't. Get 16, come back, and then talk to me. So next week, I got 16, went back, and he said, yes, of course you can have a grant. That gave me the equipment I needed to start it up. So I needed 3 things. I needed people. I had that. I needed the equipment. I got that. Then I needed somewhere to play. It was winter time, so we didn't really start until January. I decided I wanted it to be outdoors in the summer to replicate the British cricket season, but then indoors in the autumn and winter. It had to include our ladies because why would it not? I designed the game to fit into a 5-a-side AstroTurf soccer pitch, which obviously had a fence around it, and the fence became the boundaries. So we experimented with the wickets and everything else and got the right distance that our underarm ladies could reach, set the rules up, and it went from strength to strength. Immediately, I got Yorkshire Cricket involved. They came down and supported us. We appeared on BBC TV in Yorkshire, which was a very nice thing and got a lot of publicity. Now, there's a knock-on effect from this because I suddenly would get people ringing me out of the blue and saying, I've heard about this walking cricket you do. I used to play cricket years ago. Can I come? And then my stock answer was, come and have a look the first week. If you like it, then you need to join Barnsley U3A, and then you can come and play your match fee like everybody else. And very quickly, I wound up with a core of serious ex-cricketers, as well as the novice people. I then set about with local Yorkshire U3As like Sheffield and Doncaster and Wakefield, setting up walking cricket in those towns as well, and arranged with Yorkshire Cricket to provide a big trophy. So last year I can say that I was pleased to lead the Barnsley U3A walking cricket team to the Yorkshire Cricket Foundation annual Shield Trophy, and we won the final. Sounds pretty impressive, doesn't it? The fact is, there was only 2 teams playing at the time.
A rather modest Mac McKechnie. Since mid-July, his group has played walking cricket, adhering to social distancing guidelines as defined by the England and Wales Cricket Board. During the height of the UK's lockdown, U3A embarked on a nationwide search to find the best short story penned by a U3A member. The task was to write an original story of no more than 1,500 words around the theme of time. Almost 350 members responded from every corner of the UK. Panels of regional judges received all the stories anonymously and selected winners within each area, and the overall winner was Rosemary Burton from the Oxford U3A, and I'm glad to say that Rosemary is with me now. Rosemary, first of all, congratulations. It's a brilliant, brilliant story. Can I ask you, without giving the game away, roughly what the story is about?
It's a story about a clock in an empty house, and it's narrated by a woman who's come to clear out her father's house after his death. It's a grandfather clock, so you would expect it to stop after a day or 2. But every time she comes to the house, she finds it's telling a different time. So there's a bit of a mystery about that.
Has this been inspired by real life?
Was inspired by the experience of having to clear out my parents' house. They did, in fact, have a grandfather clock.
And was it something that you thought of straight away, or when you were given this theme of time, did you come up with various other options?
I thought about it. I thought it was a very large subject. Somehow this idea of a clock occurred to me as a way of narrowing it down.
And have you been writing for many, many years? Is it something since childhood?
Yes, I read stories a lot as a child. I've come back to it more now in retirement.
Apart from this being published on the U3A website, have you had anything published yourself?
No, this is the first time. First time I've been successful.
Have you entered other competitions?
Occasionally, yes. Well, I've sent things into magazines without any success.
But you have a lovely flow to it. Can I just read a little bit? And if I do it from the beginning, it won't give the game away. But I think, but this is how it starts. The clock in the hall had stopped at exactly 4:30. Of course it had stopped. It was a pendulum clock which required winding every day. I had never liked that clock. It was attractive enough in its way, I suppose, with its tall wood case, the glass panel on the front that displayed its inner workings, the ring of Roman numerals around the dial. But I disliked the loud, insistent way it ticked away the seconds, the awful distinctness with which it chimed away the quarter hours, the half hours, the hours of my father's life, I would imagine, listening to the chimes when I was lying awake at night, worrying about his failing health. That's just how it starts. And it's quite poignant. This was a clock that you had in your parents' house? I mean, it was a genuine clock, wasn't it?
It was in the hall, as I've described it. I did lie awake at night. I would hear it chiming, and I found that the loudness of the tick quite annoying. So, yeah, that's all based on real life.
Because it chimed every 15 minutes, didn't it?
Well, I may have made that up, yes. The real clock might have been chimed every hour.
But a lovely starting point. And did it bring back sadness to you because of reminding of your parents and what happened?
Of course, it's quite a traumatic thing to have to do, something that most of us go through.
But what you've managed to do is bring humour to it.
Yes, I thought that was important.
Did you find it cathartic?
Yes, I think I did in a way. It's quite a few years ago now. I don't think I could have written that story straight away. It must be more than 10 years now.
And having won, is this going to spur you on?
Maybe, I don't know.
It must have given you a great boost and a lot of confidence.
Yes, tremendously.
What was the prize, actually?
It was a £50 book prize from the Bloomsbury publishers.
Brilliant. Rosemary, I wish you the very best of luck. Rosemary from the Oxford U3A, the overall winner of the U3A Creative Writing Competition. And special mention should also go to the writers who came second and third. In second place, Penny Holland from Horncastle U3A called her story There's a Time for Everything. And she says that when she heard the theme was time, she immediately thought of the excerpt from Ecclesiastes, the passage from the Bible, which is often read out at funerals. It's a kind of black comedy, which also involves murder. The third place winner's story is somewhat more poignant. Gillian Griffith from Much Wenlock and District U3A chose as her title, Time to Leave, the story of a woman and her children in a war-torn country and their attempt to escape. She says she wanted to portray how it might feel to be such a woman in our time. And to read all the winning entries, including Rosemary's and the two I've mentioned, just go to our website at u3a.org.uk. Someone who got in touch with us following our first episode was a lady from the Guildford U3A who's published a book called From Liverpool with Love. It's the true account of Joan Collins Owen, who narrates the story of her humble beginnings in Liverpool through to finding her geeky soulmate, Eddie Owen, one night under a glitter ball. It's the story of their marriage, parenthood, and beautiful adventures together, leading up to when her husband contracted encephalitis and totally lost his memory of their 50 years as a couple. Ella Watts caught up with Joan and asked why she'd written the book.
Eddie had encephalitis in 2013 and it wiped out all his memory of our life together, which is 50 years of marriage, which is really, really sad and very, very hard and difficult. But I think I've moved on a little bit from that hard and sadness of it all. I've got this lovely story, love story. Because Eddie can't recall any of our life together, I've been writing a journal for years, memoirs, I should say. My daughter bought me a journal when I was 50, and Eddie promised he'd have it published for me when I was 60. Obviously, Eddie taking ill, that all was put on hold. So 2019, I thought I would continue writing, but the encephalitis into this book, and then it just all took off. I decided this was going to be Eddie's memories in our book. And once I started to write it, I just couldn't stop. There's so much happened in our life. Really lovely stories, lots of sadness, like a lot of people do have in their life. And the more I got to write it, the more I just loved it. I just wanted to capture everything that we've done together. As I say, all the happy times, all the sad times. And I have to say, it's one of the nicest things I could ever do for Eddie. I had it all published for our golden wedding anniversary. And everybody who knows me has had a free copy. So this book has gone to everybody, all the doctors, all the consultants. It's gone all over the world for people who have hugely influenced our life. Every day, Eddie reads this book, and every morning he gives him a jog and a smile on his face. And that is, I can't tell you what that is worth to me, because Eddie feels he can live our life, our past. Because if you could imagine, he wakes up every morning in memory, and as the morning goes on, he gets little bits of yesterday, but he can't recall our wedding day. He knows the date, but he doesn't know anything about the day. He knows the children's birthdays, but he can't remember the births and their life, which is quite tear-jerking. But we've had such a lovely, happy life, and we're still very happy. And even though I have to hold back the tears, I am so proud of myself to do this for Eddie.
What is encephalitis?
Not many people know about it, Ella. It's only really been recognised in society for 20 years. It's inflammation inside the brain, whereas meningitis is outside the brain. So it can happen to anybody, any age. There's no rule of thumb who will get encephalitis. It was a shock out of the blue. I'd vaguely heard about it in babies, but when Eddie was diagnosed with it, the consultant actually did say, don't Google it for now because you'll be really frightened what you pick up. Eddie's was limbic encephalitis. So the part of the brain that was damaged was the recall part of the brain. So if you could imagine, Eddie can still lead a normal life. He can still present a meeting, but can't recall. Unfortunately for Eddie, but in some ways it sounds strange to say, it could have been worse because Eddie could have been disabled. He could have died. The actual term for Eddie is an acquired brain injury. That's what Eddie's been left with.
You've made it clear that Eddie has lost all his memory of your life together. And I know you've given him it back in the form of this book. But the love is still there, isn't it? Because he's a poet.
Would you like me to read my best poem out?
I would.
Eddie has took to writing as a little bit of therapy. So this poem is called Joan. I wake up every morning with my mind a blank, but my wife is there and I need to thank for taking me through recent happenings in life, reducing my sorrow and feelings of strife. Whenever I'm upset, very down and sad, she supports and stimulates me to feel so glad that I'm alive, loved and physically well, and can smile so much that everyone can tell. I think she knows how deep is my love. My feelings are strong, but not well above. Those I had with my marriage vows, even when she was wonderful just as now. I can never exist without her at my side, supporting me always, acting as my guide. An angel to me, and my love is so deep, so special with the strength that I will always keep. Eddie Owen.
Joan Collins talking about her book, From Liverpool with Love, which has the subtitle, A Love Story by the Real Joan Collins. It's available now on Amazon in both a Kindle and paperback version. And Joan says she's willing to talk to anyone who's gone through a similar experience, and you can get in touch by emailing her at collinsliverpool4@gmail.com. And that's it for this time. Many thanks for all the kind comments following our first episode and the thousands of views we've had on the U3A YouTube channel. Indeed, the response has been so great that it's been decided to launch a monthly podcast, and for ease of reference, it'll be available on the same date and at the same time every month. So the next one will be on the 17th of December and available from 6 a.m. and then at the same date and time thereafter. If you have any news you'd like to share with us, or maybe you have a story to tell, we'd love to hear from you. And in case someone is being unduly modest, feel free to put them forward as well. Just send an email to communications@u3a.org.uk. That's communications@u3a.org.uk. My thanks as always to Peter Clift and Ella Watts for the interviews, and to Ella for producing the podcast. Until next time, and remember, it'll be available from 6 a.m. on the 17th of December. This is Nick Bailey saying goodbye.